Okay, one of the roles that the president plays is called chief executive. And the major job of the executive branch is to enforce the laws that Congress passes. If Congress says you have to pay tax, it's the job of the executive branch to not only collect the tax, but also to prosecute people who don't. And so there are 4 million employees in the executive branch who help him enforce the law, and he is the boss of all of them. So if you think about the executive branch being a pyramid, it starts at the bottom, the president is all the way at the top, he is the boss. I used to work in the executive branch, was briefly a lawyer for the Department of Health and Human Services. So if you think about a pyramid with the president at the top, out of 4 million employees, I'm down at the bottom. I have like 3,954,000, but was sort of in that chain. I was a lawyer for Health and Human Services, helping them administer the Medicare program. So he's the boss of all of these people. How does he run the executive branch? How does he do this? How does he get all these 4 million people under him to help him enforce the law and do what they're supposed to do? First of all, he appoints or he nominates the top 2,000 of them. So if you think of the pyramid of the people at the top, he gets to appoint or nominate them. They're people that he has chosen that work directly for him, that he's comfortable with. The people below that are sort of career employees who keep their job from president to president, but the top people are going to be his. What he also does is he issues executive orders. And an executive order is an instruction on how to do your job or how to enforce the law. So it could be something like an order from President Trump to all federal employees. Because of the snow here in DC, you can take the day off. Something like that. Or Fridays are now going to be casual Fridays. Guys don't have to wear ties, something like that. But a lot of times those executive orders are more substantive and more political. So, for example, back in the 1940s, the military was still racially segregated by units. You had a white unit and you had an African American unit. President Truman sent an order to the military saying, you've got to integrate. Everybody's going to be in the same units together. We're not going to racially segregate anymore. Obama, for example. Issued an executive order to the CIA saying no more waterboarding. Waterboarding was sort of the technique. Some people said it was torture, some people said it wasn't, but it was a technique the CIA was using to try to get some people to talk, to give information. And Obama sent out an executive order saying, we're not going to do this anymore. You need to stop. One of the first orders that President Trump had when he came into office was what he called the travel ban. He put a ban on people coming from certain countries, most of which were Muslim majority. And so he sent an email or an order to the TSA or the Immigration Services saying don't take people from these particular countries. So it's basically an instruction from the president to his people in the executive branch telling them how to do their job. And it can be something really minor, but it can also be something pretty important like a travel ban or no more waterboarding or something like that. He also prosecutes people who break the law. If Congress passes a law, it's up to him to prosecute people who break it. And that is done by one of his particular departments called the Department of Justice. If you break a federal law, national law, the Department of Justice are going to be the ones that are going to charge you and bring you to court and try to put you in jail. So he's got different things that he does to try to enforce the laws that Congress passed in his role as chief executive. Basically, we're going to break the executive branch down into three different parts. The cabinet departments, something called the Executive Office of the President, and then also the White House staff. So for example, you hear about the Department of State. They do all the diplomacy, foreign affairs. The Department of Education. You've got the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Justice over here. They're the ones who prosecute people who break the law. So you've got all these different departments. For most of them, what they do is pretty clear from the name, like education or agriculture. They've got kind of a specific job to do. The heads of the departments are called secretaries. So you've got the Secretary of Education, Secretary of Agriculture, etc. And like a lot of the top people in the executive branch, those secretaries are nominated by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. So the Senate gets a role to play in who's going to head up each of these departments. So there's also something called the cabinet, and the cabinet is the department heads, I think there's 15 of them, and some other top officials, like for example, the vice president, and all of those top officials get together. And as a group, they are considered to be advisors to the president. So sometimes you hear on the news, President Trump is meeting with his cabinet today. That's who that's going to be, the 15 department heads, education, agriculture, and also some other top officials like the vice president. They advise the president on sort of different matters, and they get together as a group and do that. A different part of the executive branch is called the Executive Office of the President. And basically, that's got three major parts to it. First of all, the National Security Council. And basically, they coordinate security issues. They make sure that the Department of Defense and the Department of State and the FBI and the CIA and Homeland Security and all the different agencies and divisions that have some role to play in keeping us safe, the National Security Council sort of makes sure that they're on the same page and that they're all sharing information and talking. Another part of the executive office of the president is called the Council of Economic Advisors. And they do exactly what the name would suggest. They advise the president on the economy. Some top economists from around the country who get together and help the president make decisions as far as taxing and spending and economic matters. The third part of the executive office of the president is called the OMB, or the Office of the Management and Budget. And their job is to help the president prepare the annual budget that he sends to Congress every year. He doesn't get to make the budget, but he sends a proposal to Congress. So let's put proposal up here. And then Congress passes a budget like any other law, but he sends over a proposal. And basically a budget is an outline of proposed taxing and spending for the year. So the president sends over a proposal to Congress. We should tax this much, we should spend this much, here's what we should spend it on. And then Congress takes that and changes it and enacts what they want to enact. But it starts with a proposal from the president. And the OMB is the group of people that help him put that together. The last part of the executive branch is called the White House office, or sometimes called the White House staff. And unlike the others, who have sort of a particular policy expertise, like you know a lot about education, so you're in the Department of Education, you know a lot about budget issues, so you're in the OMB. The White House staff are people who are there purely to help the president do his job. So, for example, the press secretary is somebody that goes out and speaks to the media every day on behalf of the president and answers questions and tells them whatever message the president wants to get out. The speechwriter is in the White House staff, helps write speeches. The chief of staff is sort of the president's right-hand person, right-hand man or right-hand woman, who keeps the trains running, keeps his schedule, organizes meetings, decides who's going to meet with the president, who's not, and basically keeps everything running and on time. So, for example, also people in the White House staff would be people like the chef, the White House cook, people like that. So these people don't necessarily have like one policy field in which they are experts. They're basically there to help the president do his job. And so because of that, they do not need Senate confirmation. Whoever the president wants for these jobs, he gets them without the Senate's approval, because these are just people to sort of help them. And these people, because they don't need Senate approval, and because he can have whoever he wants and he works with these people on a daily basis, a lot of times they are his most trusted advisors. These are the people he works with the most closely, that he trusts the most. So that's how the executive branch is broken down. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on this when we talk about the bureaucracy.